Well, I'm glad you're here. You know, I always start out by asking questions, and the first question I ask is, how many of you have tried to lose weight before and get healthy? How many of you have found that weight that you lost before and put it back on? How many of you are here for the first time? How many of you still wouldn't raise your hand no matter what I asked? I use that joke every time and it works. I mean, I'm going to continue. All right, so Rich Gay, I'm going to hopefully spend the next couple minutes and make you laugh a little bit, maybe joke a few or two, and hopefully share some of my insight, what I learned during my journey, so you can take a nugget or two away and apply to your journey. Because you know, Pastor Steve and myself, we both wrote books. I never set out to write a book. I'm sure Pastor Steve didn't either. And I tell everyone I talk to, I said, you're the next book. You know, everyone you do in the next book. Everyone has their story and how they do it. So, next slide, please. So let me start out with telling a little bit of background about myself. Next. That's me with a full head of hair, a little more blonder when I was in kindergarten. I like those shirts. I like those shirts back then. Next, please. And then there I was as a svelte lieutenant in the United States Navy about 20 years ago. You know, when you're in the military, you kind of have that hammer over your head that you got to stay in shape. That's part of the military. You're in the armed forces, so you got to stay in shape. And I always kind of struggle with it, but I managed to do it. Next, please. And then what happened to me? Next. There's me in 2005 at 277 pounds. You click it maybe 3 more pounds. 277 pounds, obese and overweight, over 100 pounds, fatty liver, high cholesterol, sleep apnea. Anybody know what sleep apnea is? You know, how many, you know, I'm not going to ask how many you have that. You know, basically, it's when you stop breathing when you sleep. And fatty liver, you know what a fatty liver is? I mean, essentially, a fatty liver, and I didn't realize this until after I didn't have it anymore, but a fatty liver is not a good thing to have. I mean, your liver is your detox filter in your body, right? And if your liver is not working right, then you got a problem. You got a lot of toxins building up, right? So you hear about alcoholics that have cirrhosis of the liver, right? Well, that's pretty much the same thing. Your liver is basically deteriorating because it's turning to fat. And I was suffering from, I'm like, holy mackerel. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how frequent that was. And all kinds of other things that were going on with me, right? Everything from my knee problems, my back problems. I remember Pastor Steve was telling a joke one time. He went to the doctor and he says, you know, Doc, I got a back problem. And the doctor said, you don't have a back problem, you got a front problem. You got to lose some weight there, right? So there I was at 277 pounds, obese and overweight, and you know, that's where I started. Okay. Next, please. And you see where I am. And I'm a project manager by trade, project management professional. I realized that my biggest project was myself, so I applied some of the principles I learned in project management. And I never set out to write a book. I really never set out to write a book. But every week I realized, I got on my knees, I looked up at heaven, I said, God, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I can't do this anymore. And I asked for his help, and I moved out. And I scoped, scheduled, and resourced my journey. I said, I want to be under 199 pounds by my birthday, and that was 6 months. And I was able to achieve that, you know, typical good project manager. I was able to achieve that ahead of schedule by 2 weeks. And then something amazing happened. This is the thing I really want, you know, one of the things I want you to take away with small, simple changes, is I not only got to my weight where I wanted to be, you know, everyone says I want to lose 10 pounds, I want to lose 10 pounds, things like that. But I was doing these small, simple changes, and we'll go over that in a few minutes, and eating and activity. Notice I use the word activity, right? Eating and activity. And then something magical happened. Because our bodies are magnificent. You know, Psalm talks about how we're wonderfully made. I started dropping more weight, and I basically bottomed out at about 173 pounds. So I went past that one. My initial goal was I want to be under 199. Folks, it's been so long since I, you know, didn't know what my weight was going to be that I had no idea what my weight should be, right? So I just kept on doing these things that I was doing, these small, simple changes. here's, I know that picture might be a little hard to see. I'll show you a couple of visual aids here. These are my actual shorts that I used to wear.
Wow.
You know, so you can, anybody else want to join me in these? There are a couple of people in there. And these are my, these are my pants that I wore with my suit when I was at work. You can see, these are 48-inch waist. And, you know, women, yeah, guys do wear the stretchy pants too. And you can see it's worn out, so I was more like a 50, you know, so I was pretty much getting up there. And so that's just another visual aid. So, anyway, I started doing these small simple changes. I realized, I didn't put it on overnight. Here's the key, right? You didn't put it on overnight, you're not going to take it off overnight. I tried the rubber bands, I call them the expensive rubber bands, the pills, the potions, all those goofy things. How many of you tried the thing where you put it around your abs, you eat your chips and ice cream at night, and then you wake up in the morning and you got a six-pack, right? Yeah, it doesn't work like that, folks. So what happened during my journey, you look at me now and it's been about, 7, 8 years now. And about a couple of years ago, I decided, I've been keeping the weight off for all these years, and I don't ever see it coming back. Praise God for that. So I wanted to step it up a notch, right? And this is a theme I want to make sure everybody gets this. Every one of you should be a student of fitness and nutrition. You want to become a student of fitness and nutrition. If anything is more important, see, hundreds of years ago, biblical times, we didn't have to worry about that because we did stuff physically, we ate right. But today there's so much noise out there, right? Satan rarely attacks from the front. It's always from the side and the rear, the military advantage, right? And it seeps into our lives. So you have to be very vigilant of what's going into your body and you keep yourself moving. So what did I do? I stepped it up a little bit, and I went to a friend of mine who was a trainer, and I said, hey, I'm very interested in, in bodybuilding, and I went and pursued that for a little bit, learned a lot about nutrition. This is natural bodybuilding. We actually have to take a drug test before you compete, and I learned a lot about that, drug-free. I learned a lot about nutrition. I got several certifications subsequent to that. And one more click, please. And I walked away with, with a little piece of iron. It's called a, trophy. I was 4th place. I was over 50. I was in the over 50 crowd. I figured, I just turned 50. I'm going to do something crazy. So I trained for that for about 6 months. And I came in 4th place. I figured, I should do pretty good. There's just a bunch of old guys up there, us over 50. But what I didn't realize, a lot of these guys that were over 50 have been doing it for like 20 years. So I was like, okay, 4th place. I was very happy with that. Just to get on the stage and compete with other people and learn the process and how magnificent your body is. And oh, by the way, all those people you see on the magazines, they're like that maybe a week a year. They're not like that all year long. I just want to make sure that they understand that. Athletes train to get to a certain point, and then they kind of rest out. And then one other accomplishment I've been recently told about is that, I kind of look like, the new James Bond, Daniel Craig. Next slide, please. My daughter posted this on Facebook, and I was like, hey, I'll take that one too. But anyway, so next slide, please. So as Pastor Steve said, I'm an author of Small Simple Changes DVD, and I've been with the program from day one. Next slide, please. But why do I kind of click 2 times? Why do I bring all this stuff up, right? So I'm showing you a bunch of pictures of Rich. You go, man, this guy's pretty vain. Why is he showing us all these pictures, I wanted to show you all these pictures, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my background before I jump into Small Simple Changes. Because I want you to understand, folks, that's where I've been. This is where I have been, right? I know how it feels. It does not feel good, right? I remember those days waking up in the morning having an eye problem. How many wake up in the morning having an eye problem? When I just can't see going to work today. That kind of thing. You just don't feel good about yourself, and you just want to stay home, and you just feel terrible. I mean, everything. Do you think when I look like this, that I would ever think about being on a stage competing in competitive bodybuilding? having been here? No way, there's no way. So why did I show you all that? Do you think that I would have, been mistaken for Daniel Craig as, I was at the James Bond ball during New Year's. A lot of people came up to me and asked to take my picture. I said, man, you must be really drunk. You think I look like Daniel Craig? But anyway, why do I tell you all this stuff? I tell you because I know where your thought process is, right? You're thinking, that'll never happen to me. Well, yeah, it will. When you start seeing success, when you start applying small, simple changes, and every week you start seeing changes, I'm not talking about just the scale, right? I'm talking about your mind and your body. You're going to start feeling different. And your mind's going to start changing. And you're going to start thinking about, when I was like this, I was thinking about what? Retirement and death. That's what I was thinking about, right? So what do I think about now? I think about the next 50 years. I'm excited about the next 50 years. I got a grandson that I'm raising right now. He's 7 years old. He's, the pride of my life, and I want to be around when he graduates from college and when he starts having kids. Like Pastor Steve says, his why. We'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So, everybody reaches a tipping point, right? And I hit a tipping point. That day in my bed, I rolled out of bed. I had a pain in my side. I was just feeling, the feeling in the morning. I rolled out of my bed. I got on my knees and I said, God, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I can't do this anymore. I need your help. 1 Corinthians 6:19 was a verse I came across many times. How many people have read that verse? I mean, you've read it probably a million times, but there's that one time where, boom, it hits you in the face, right? And that was part of my tipping point. Next slide, please. And then the next verse I realized, and I claim this is my life verse, is, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What's the key word there? All things. Not just, I can't defeat that chocolate cake or that Krispy Kreme. No, all things. And I encourage you, like Pastor Steve teaches us, to personalize that and say, Mary can do all things through Christ who strengthens her. Ken can do all things through Christ who can strengthen him. So personalize that and own that. So these verses were my tipping point, right? There's a lot of things that you go along and they kind of encourage you, but this is my tipping point. Next slide, please. So one of the things you're going to learn about in the program is what is your why, right? Is the inspiration. You're dedicated because you're here on a Saturday morning at 32 degrees out, and where most of us would want to be sleeping in. So you're going to learn about inspiration. What's your inspiration? Why do you want to lose weight? If you want to lose, it'll change. It's going to change over time. For me, my long term is what? It's my grandson. I'm raising a grandson, right? I'm an old school guy, protect and provide. My dad, God bless him, he's pushing 90 now, and he raised 4 boys, and my mom as well too. And I take that as a personal responsibility. My grandson, I'm going to raise him. I'm going to make sure I'm going to stay healthy until he's 18, and then I'll start eating the donuts again. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to raise him, and stay healthy, and I'm going to teach him how to be healthy from what I learned. So you got to have short-term goal. What was my short-term goal? I wanted to be under 199. What was my long-term goal? Well, I need to be around and take care of my grandson. You see where I'm going with this? It's going to change over time. It's okay to have a short-term saying, I want to get into that dress for the wedding or this reunion or whatever. That's okay. But you got to have a driving one, an overarching long-term one. So that's very important. Because when you get your why down, because the average American attempts to lose weight 4 times a year. You know that? 4 times a year. You know why it's 4 times a year? We should only do it once. You can click next. You know why? Because they don't have a strong why. You got to have a strong why. I was 277 pounds probably for a year or two. And then eventually I just got sick and tired. And then I don't know where you're at mentally, and spiritually, and physically. You're obviously physically you want to lose the weight, but mentally you're going to learn this program, right? Through the 4 Keys to a Better Body. You're going to learn about inspiration. You're going to really dig in there and say, here's my why. This is why I want to lose it and keep it off. Okay, very important. Next slide, please. So as I was going through this journey, I learned a lot about fitness, nutrition, and obesity. And it is a national crisis because as you can see, 2 out of 3 adult Americans are either obese or overweight. This quote's over 3 years old, and I kept it up there for a reason. Because that $100 billion that it's costing the healthcare system in obesity is now over $150 billion. Can you imagine having a stock in 3 years that went up 50%? That's pretty good, right? That's not good for us as a nation. That means everything from cars to computers costs more money because of obesity. It is an epidemic, folks. Make no mistake. We have to get this under control. And over 300,000 people die as a result of obesity every year. Do we have anybody who remembers the Vietnam War? Right? My brother served there. About 60,000 brave Americans gave their lives during the Vietnam War, which spanned 13 years, right? In 1 year, 5 times that amount of people die because of obesity. That's not good. And you know, we hear a big number like that, and it's a statistic, and it's like, oh, it's a big number. Next slide, please. So you remember I told you I'm going to jerk a little tear here? This is my brother. He's 56 years old, was 56 years old. He died in October. He's over 300 pounds. He was a United States Marine, served in Vietnam, and he's one of those 300,000. You know, I did what I could through the years, but for whatever reason, he did what he did. This is real personal to me now. Folks, this is about life and death. This is not about vanity. I just want to make sure you understand. Next slide, please. So where do you start? We talk about small, simple changes. Remember I said you don't take it off, you didn't put it on overnight? You're not going to take it off overnight, okay? Next slide, please, or next. The battle begins in the mind. You know, in 2 Corinthians it talks about you have to take every thought captive. You know, every thought captive. Next. Habits form in 21 days. We're going to talk about habits, right? Because we're really a bundle of habits, aren't we? I mean, we get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, and things like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, because that's kind of the nuts and bolts of small, simple changes. Next slide, please. So what is a habit? A habit's a neutral thing, right? It consists of a trigger, a routine, and a reward. You're walking through an office, you see a candy dish, trigger. The routine is you pick it up mindlessly, and the reward is it tastes good, you eat it, right? How many have done that? I know I have, right? So now, that's a habit. That's a bad habit. A good habit, it's 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and it's time for me to go to the gym. I got my bag, I'm out the door, I'm going to do my thing. I got my trigger, my bag, my routine is I go work out. My reward is I feel fantastic after I'm done working out. You see? It's a neutral thing, right? One's bad, one's good. Next slide, please. So, what's your trigger guard for the bad habits? You know, like a gun has a trigger guard, right? What's your trigger guard? What's your trigger guard for that candy dish? Avoid it. You know, if you know the trigger is when you see it, you're going to pick it up and eat it, then either replace something with that. Again, I'm just planting some seeds of thought here. You're going to learn a lot more during the program. But think about it for a minute. You know, it's not about using willpower or that kind of thing. It's about retraining yourself. It's installing that trigger guard so you don't mindlessly pick up that piece of candy and move on. Next slide, please. We're going to learn about activity and eating habits throughout this program. You can click it again. When I talk about activity, I mean it's about movement. It's about going manual. When I talk about eating, it's about eating to live, not living to eat. Next slide, please. Now, when you think about calories, you can click it again. When you think about food that you put into your body, next, please. You think of calories and activity are kind of like a seesaw, right? Next slide, please. And if you put too much in, obviously, you know, food is energy. Food is fuel. If you put too much in, then obviously it's going to go into places where you don't want it to, right? Guys on the love handle and women on the hips and in the back, right? Places you don't want. So it's about balancing. We're going to learn about that. We're going to talk a lot about activity during the program. Activity. We all know what that is, a shopping cart. How many times have you seen a shopping cart in the parking lot, right, that are way out there? So I always laugh when I see a shopping cart that's like 3 feet away from the carousel to put them. It's like, come on, guys. I always take a shopping cart inside. Next slide, please. So where are you at now on activity? Wherever you're at, just move. We're going to move in a couple minutes with the awesome Dr. Liz Urbano on Body and Soul, which I'm really excited about. I really encourage you to take advantage of Body and Soul. So when it comes to where you're at now, it's just move a little more, you know? Add a little more activity there. You're going to learn about cardio exercise, strength training, flexibility and balance. These are components of exercise. Next slide, please. And then we talk about, let me talk about activity for a minute. Is Gail in this morning, Gail Maines? Gail was formerly overweight and suffering from metabolic syndrome. And she started out with walking 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes, folks. Now she does 5Ks, and she no longer has metabolic syndrome. This is amazing stuff. When you make those small, simple changes, you can have a huge impact on your health. Next slide, please. So let's talk about eating for a minute. We all know the size of our stomach, right? Don't say it's this big, Rich. No, your stomach anatomically is about what? A little bit bigger than your fist, right? And I always ask people, if our stomach is the size of our fist anatomically, why do we eat the size of our heads? Right? I mean, that's a typical serving that we see in restaurants. What I typically do with that is I split it in half as soon as I get it. Or when I'm with Trish, I do the romantic thing and split it in half, and we eat it. You know, we have one plate, we eat it that way. But we don't eat all that food all at once. We're trained to eat it that way. And believe me, the kids in insert country will not starve if you don't eat that. Right? You've all been taught that when you were kids. I know that. Next slide, please. So where are you at now when it comes to eating? Realize, where am I at? What am I eating? Eventually, you want to transition to whole foods. Do you know how much a bag of kale costs? Anybody know what kale is? You never learned about kale. Kale's one of the most, Pastor Steve told me about kale. Kale's one of the most nutrient-dense greens on the planet. 1 pound of kale costs $2. $2. You throw that in a shake and you got the most energized drink in the world. There's nothing chemically you can put together that's better than kale, and it's really cheap. But we'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. So Sandy, what did she do with explosive change? She did one thing. She eliminated white bread from her diet. She lost 40 pounds in 1 year. She changed nothing else. No exercise, nothing. She changed nothing else, and she lost over 40 pounds in 1 year. Next slide, please. So let me wrap up with, you can click it a couple more times. Let me wrap up with say, it's all about making small, simple changes weekly, and then looking at them daily, right? Don't overwhelm yourself. Stick with one, reinforce it, because remember, a habit forms in 21 days. And then you're going to want to update your lifestyle plan and put these changes in there. You want to become a student of fitness, you, and nutrition. And remember the acronym FUN. Fitness, you, and nutrition. You want to become a student of fun, right? And lastly, I want to leave you with this. Every one of you are assembled for achievement, and you have greatness within you. You're endowed with seeds of greatness, as Zig Ziglar used to say. And you guys can make this happen. So the last thing I'd like to say is, I hope that I see less and less of each and every one of you. Thank you very much.